The Missionary Zeal of Saint Maximilian Maria Kolbe. The lifebow of the greatest missionary martyr of the 20th century, whom Pope John Paul II described as the patron of that difficult century, and who the Polish people, for the period from 1939 to 1945, considered to be the personification of their martyred nation, stretches from the Occident to the Orient. Through the Militia Immaculatae, the Miraculous Medal, and the numerous publications in a variety of languages, Saint Maximilian Maria Kolbe has left his spiritual footprint on every continent. From the very beginning of the life of Saint Maximilian, in the remote little town of Zduńska Wola, in that region of Poland that was under the tyrannical rule of the Tsar, to the end of that life under the Nazi tyranny in the Auschwitz starvation bunker, a providential guidance may be discerned. On the very first day of his life, Raimund Kolbe was baptized in the church dedicated to the Feast of the Assumption of the Most Blessed Virgin Mary. The last day of his life was on the vigil of the Assumption of the Most Blessed Virgin Mary. Born at 1 a.m. on January 8, 1894, one hour after the feast day of Raimund Pennefor, the great scholar and missionary of Barcelona, Mariana and Julius decided to name their second child Raimund, diminutive Mundek. Was it parental hope on the part of Mariana and Julius that one day their little Mundek would imitate his great namesake? The major illustration that Providence was directing his life was Raimund's experience as a child before the altar of the Virgin Mary in the Pabinica St. Matthew's Church, the family having moved from Zduńska Wola to Pabinica. Mundek related to Mariana, Mamuja, mommy, the word Mundek used to address his mother. He said, "The Virgin Mary appeared to me. In one hand she held a white crown, and in the other hand a red crown. The Blessed Mother asked me, 'Raimund, would you like to have these crowns?' I replied, 'Yes, Holy Mother, I would like to have them.' The Virgin Mary smiled and disappeared." Other early signs of providential guidance in the life of the youth Raimund Kolbe were: contrary to expectations, he received tutoring from a neighbor that enabled him to enter the elementary classes that his older brother Francis attended. In 1907, both Raimund and Francis were accepted into the Franciscan Minor Seminary in Lvov in Austria-occupied Poland. Because Mariana and Julius could afford the tuition for their oldest son only, Vicar Jakowski assumed the role of patron for both Kolbe brothers. The providential guidance in Mundek's struggle to balance piety with patriotism was plainly revealed in the late summer of 1910, when it appeared that the battle for Poland's independence was about to begin. Recalling the words of his beloved poet, Adam Mickiewicz, "Wherever in Europe liberty is in chains, and there is the effort to burst those bonds, There is the fight for the fatherland, and to fight in that struggle is the duty of all. Mundek persuaded his brother Francis that they should not begin their novitiate as Franciscan friars, but rather they should withdraw from the seminary in order to become legionnaires in the forthcoming battle for Poland's independence. What happened? This excerpt from Mary's Night, page 64, describes what took place. As they prepared to go to the Father Provincial with their announcement, the bell in the seminary parlor rang, indicating that a visitor had entered the seminary. The visitor was Mamuja. Yosio, the youngest Kolbe's son, now is ready to enter the seminary, Mariana exulted. Now that God has permitted me to see all three of my sons Franciscans, dedicated to Him and the Blessed Virgin, my maternal heart overflows with joy, and I can exclaim with the father of Thérèse of Lisieux, Louis Martin, who gave all 5 of his daughters to the religious life. What an honor God is doing me by asking me for one child after another. Francis and Mundek looked at each other in stunned silence. They could not bring themselves to tell their mother that they were about to abandon their Franciscan vocation. After Mariana departed, Mundek said, "We can't possibly leave the seminary now. It would break Mamuja's heart." In a letter from Rome dated April 20th, 1919, the Franciscan priest, Father Maximilian, wrote to Mariana, "As Francis and I were about to go to the Father Provincial to inform him that we didn't wish to enter the order, the bell in the parlor rang. In this critical hour, God's providence, in fathomless mercy, mediated by the Immaculata, sent our Mamuja to us. With her visit, our Lord God ripped all of Satan's nets." On September 4th, 1910, Raymond Kolbe began his novitiate with his Franciscan name Maximilian, he who aspires to the highest goal. As his great example, St. Francis, once had aspired to a knight's vocation, but was overruled by heaven's decree. "Francis, build my church." So the novice Maximilian Kolbe had heard in heaven's admonition, in the voice of his mother, and from that moment on dedicated himself exclusively to his Franciscan calling. Another giant step in the submission of his will to providential guidance was Maximilian's acceptance of his teacher's decision in the autumn of 1912 to send him for study in Rome. We can't be certain of the motives that led Maximilian to request that his name be deleted from the list of the 7 Polish students to be sent for study in Rome. Was it reluctance to leave family and his native Poland for 7 years that prompted his request? It was at this point that Maximilian realized that he must submit his will to his order and to his mentors. His simple equation to express his obedience and submission: will equals sanctification. That is, when my will, lowercase, is in harmony with divine will, uppercase, sanctification is achieved. Following the Franciscan tradition of reverence for the Virgin Mary, and greatly influenced by the totus tuus, submission to the Virgin Mary, in the writings of Louis-Marie Grignon de Montfort, Catherine Labouré, Thérèse of Lisieux, Gemma Galgani, on November 1st, 1914, All Saints' Day, Maximilian, in taking his perpetual vows, requested to be permitted to add the name Mary to his Franciscan name. As of November 1st, 1914, his signature would read Maximilian Maria Kolbe. Maximilian also embraced wholeheartedly the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception, Ineffabilis Deus, and the witness of Bernadette Soubirous concerning the 18 visions of the Virgin Mary that she received from February 11th to July 16th in 1858. In one of these revelations to Bernadette, the Virgin Mary had announced, "I am the Immaculate Conception." The Church's dogma of Ineffabilis Deus and the Virgin Mary's identification of herself to Bernadette, as well as the totus tuus, submission to the Virgin Mary, that he discovered in his favorite authors, became the foundation of Maximilian's theology and the driving force for his missionary zeal. Thus it was in Rome, from 1912 to 1919, that providential guidance became wedded to missionary zeal and gave birth to one of the more energetic, committed, and cosmopolitan missionary movements, the Militia Immaculatae. The date was February 17th, 1917, the day on which the Masonic Order held a major demonstration against the Pope and the Roman Catholic Church. This demonstration by the Church's enemies convinced the 23-year-old Franciscan Maximilian Maria Kolbe that a vigorous missionary activity on the part of the Church was necessary to combat the increasing animosity that confronted the Church from an aggressive and agnostic world. Finally, on October 16, 1917, the Feast of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, the seminary student Maximilian met with 6 of his fellow students, 3 priests and 3 friars, in Friar Antonio Mansi's room at the Seraphic College. The date for the meeting, October 16th, is significant. The Church of the Sacred Heart in Rome, where perpetual adoration of the Eucharist was maintained by French nuns, was one of Maximilian's favorite places to worship. On that evening, Maximilian presented to that small group his draft of a constitution for the sodality then being founded, the Militia Immaculatae. Later, Father Paul wrote concerning that meeting, "As the oldest person present, I was the first to sign. I believe that Brother Massimiliano signed last. I do not know whether or not that original draft has been preserved. If it has been, it would illustrate what little importance Brother Massimiliano attached to appearance. On 1/8 of a sheet of paper, he drafted the constitution of a great movement." At the Mass at the Seraphic College in Rome, celebrating the diamond anniversary of the founding of the Militia Immaculatae, the then Cardinal Carlo Wojtyła said, "It is here that Father Kolbe discovered the mystery of the Immaculate. And he discovered this not only as the greatest beauty of the created universe, but above all as a force, a most powerful energy, which he wished to share with others as well. To that end, he dedicated all his labors and gave it the name of Militia Immaculatae." In the mind of the young Polish Franciscan friar, there was born the idea that would give birth to a worldwide missionary movement, establish the largest Franciscan monastery in the world, and employ the most modern technology to proclaim the gospel. Friar Maximilian's alliance on the Immaculata and his own commitment and perseverance avoided the fate of many great ideas. What good are thoughts if they remain only action seed? Sterile the idea, never transformed into deed. Concepts remain a moribund banality when never engendered into vitality. On that evening, October 16, 1917, Friar Maximilian could not have known that 61 years later, on October 16, 1978, his countryman, the Cardinal Archbishop of Krakow, Karl Wojtyła, would be elected to the pontifical office, thus fulfilling the 1848 prediction of the poet Julius Slavatsky. "Behold, there is coming a Slav Pope, brother of the nations. As rulers distribute weapons, he disseminates love's salutations. While petitioning for the world in its dismal dark hour, he will gain heaven's mercy through the sacrament's mystic power." Appropriately, Friar Maximilian was ordained to the priesthood April 28, 1918, on the 202nd anniversary of the death of Louis-Marie Grignon de Montfort, the indefatigable French missionary whose writings greatly had influenced Maximilian, and whose Totus Tuus also became the cornerstone of Maximilian's theology and the guiding principium of the Militia Immaculatae. Immediately upon returning to Poland in July 1919, Maximilian began to enlist his countrymen in the Militia Immaculatae and to distribute the miraculous medal. From August 10, 1920 until April 28, 1921, he recuperated from his recurrent tubercular attacks at Zakopane in the high Tatra mountains of southern Poland. While at Zakopane, Father Maximilian served as chaplain in the hospital and presented lectures on religion in a sanatorium whose residents were known for their agnosticism and atheism. Not a few of those residents were converted to the Catholic faith and accepted the miraculous medal. During the Red Army's invasion of Poland in the summer of 1920, some Russian prisoners of war were incarcerated at Zakopane. In a letter to Father Girolamo Biasi in Rome, Father Maximilian described his missionary witness to the prisoners. When the Bolshevik prisoners were incarcerated here, there were about 40 of them, I had books on apologetics in the Russian language sent here from our Militia Immaculatae library in Krakow. I distributed the books to the Russians and appointed one of them to serve as librarian. They accepted the miraculous medal. They said to me, "Whenever we look at our medal, we will remember that a priest gave it to us." After departing Zakopane, Father Maximilian was sent to Nishava to further recuperation. He was permitted to return to Krakow in November 1921. To accommodate a nationwide growing membership in the Militia Immaculatae, Father Kolbe requested his superiors for permission to publish a journal. Despite opposition from some within his own Franciscan community, permission was granted with the proviso that all debts were to be borne by Father Maximilian and the Militia Immaculatae. In January 1922, the first number of Recherches Nipokalani, that the money miracle made possible, was published. By the decision of his superiors, Father Maximilian moved his publication headquarters to the Grodno Monastery from October 1922 until December 1927. In an article published in the November 1924 number of Recherches Nipokalani, Father Maximilian listed the three major weapons in the Militia Immaculatae's arsenal: prayer, mortification, love. Concerning love, Father Maximilian wrote, "We must love our neighbor not because he is amiable, cooperative, wealthy, influential, nor because he responds in gratitude. These motives are self-serving, unworthy of Our Lady's Nights. Since love elevates itself above the world and ascends to God, in God we love everyone, the good and the wicked, the friend and the foe." One of Father Maximilian's favorite spiritual mentors, Thérèse of Lisieux, had written, "In the heart of the Church that is our mother, I will be love, because we can love God only in that measure in which we love our fellow human beings." At the Grodno Monastery, not built to accommodate large presses and publishing paraphernalia, as subscriptions to Recherches Nipokalani increased by leaps and bounds, it became clear to Father Maximilian that he must seek a site where he could build a press center to meet the missionary endeavor of the Militia Immaculatae. Prince Jan Maria Drudzki-Lubecki donated a large plot of land not far from Warsaw, on which the Nipokalano City of the Immaculate Monastery was built. The cloister was consecrated on December 7th, 1927, the vigil of the 73rd anniversary of the promulgation of Ineffabilis Deus. In 1929, Father Maximilian gained permission to open a seminary at Nipokalano. He wanted to train his friars and priests so that there would be no lack of enthusiasm among the students for the mission field and for the guiding principles of the Militia Immaculatae. Reflecting on the challenge in Rerum Ecclesiae issued by Pope Pius XI on February 28, 1926, in which the Pope pleaded for missionaries to take the gospel to foreign lands outside Christian civilization. Maximilian's restless missionary spirit now summoned him to travel to the Orient. Pope Pius XI had written, "We ponder the fact that the pagans number almost 1 billion. We have no rest in our spirit, and seem to hear sounding in our ears, 'Shout out, do not hold back, lift up your voice like a trumpet.' If there should be in your diocese any young men who seem called by God to this sublime apostolate, far from putting obstacles in their way, you should encourage them. Neither scarcity of priest nor any special need of your own diocese ought to discourage you or keep you from giving your consent. It is our supreme desire that from now on it will be impossible to point to a cleric who is not literally burning with love for the missions." On April 24th, 1930, Father Maximilian, along with Brother Zeno and Brother Hilary, arrived in Nagasaki. 1 month later, on May 24th, 1930, despite difficulties and even opposition to the publication of a Japanese language version of Recherche Nipokalani, Maximilian sent a telegram to Nipokalanov. "Today we published Saibo no Kishi. We have a press. Glory to the Immaculata." Establishing the Mugensai no Sono Garden of the Immaculate monastery in Nagasaki was very challenging. The Japanese summers were particularly enervating on the Polish Franciscans, and they lived and worked under conditions of severe deprivation. At times, his poor health and the overwhelming difficulties he confronted in Japan plunged Maximilian into depression. In a letter to the Father Provincial, dated January 7, 1931, Maximilian wrote, "How often it seemed to me that I possessed neither faith nor hope, nor could I feel any love. Satan came with the question, 'Why did you come here?'" Father Maximilian's faith in the Immaculata always rescued him from depression's abyss. The motto on the desk of Professor Dr. Albert Schweitzer, the great 20th century medical missionary to Africa, could apply equally as well to Father Maximilian. The admonition reads, "Higher, always higher, even when your heaven is enveloped in darkness. Then permit your faith star to shine. Higher, always higher." Father Maximilian returned to Poland from Japan in 1936 and once again became guardian at Nipokalanov. The missionary outreach of Nipokalanov through Recherche Nipokalani and Maui Jenik, a daily newspaper, and numerous other publications, together with distribution of the miraculous medal, became well known. On December 11, 1938, the Nipokalanov radio station began broadcasting. At the end of 1938, Nipokalanov had 11 priests, 660 friars, 30 novices, 129 pupils in the seminary for minors. In 1938, the membership in the Militia Immaculatae increased by 68,628. Rishesh Nipokalani reached a monthly press run of 1 million copies. The press run for the calendar was 440,000. The Little Knight was published in 170,000 copies. Maui Jenik had a daily press run of well over 100,000 copies, and a weekend press run of 260,730 copies. Miles Immaculatae reached a press run of 12,000 copies. During the year 1938, the Nipokalanov editors received 835,586 pieces of mail. In 1939, Saibo no Kishi would reach a press run of 70,000 copies, making it the largest Catholic publication in Japan. As the Wehrmacht approached Nipokalanov in summer 1939, Father Maximilian sent most of Nipokalanov's residents into the Polish Red Cross and into other charitable institutions. He took leave of his brothers with the words, "Don't forget love. Hatred is not creative. Only love is creative." During his internment, with 40 of his Franciscan brothers, from September 19th until December 8th, 1939, Father Kolbe witnessed to his fellow inmates and distributed the miraculous medal. Even some of his captors accepted the medal. On December 8th, 1939, Father Kolbe and his brothers were released and permitted to return to Nipokalanov. From December 1939 until February 17, 1941, on which date Father Kolbe was arrested and ultimately sent to Auschwitz, he once again administered Nipokalanov, but under the surveillance of the occupying authority. During this almost 14-month period at his beloved Nipokalanov, Father Kolbe hosted refugees, ministered to German soldiers who lay ill in the cloister infirmary, prayed with them and for them, and distributed the miraculous medal to all who would accept it. One particular episode related to me by Brother Ivo Aktelik illustrates Father Maximilian's love-motivated ministry. It was Christmas Eve, 1940. The entire cloister was illuminated as the Nipokalanov community assembled for the Christmas Eve midnight Mass. Before the service began, Brother Ivo, accompanied by a young Wehrmacht corporal, approached Maximilian. "Father," Brother Ivo said, "may I introduce Corporal Holzer from Wuppertal in the Ruhr region of Germany? Corporal Holzer is part of the Wehrmacht contingent stationed in our friary. Corporal Holzer asked me to request of you to permit him to attend our Christmas Eve Mass and to receive communion with our friars and with the residents of our monastery." With a smile, Maximilian extended his hand to Corporal Holzer and said, "All who love our Lord Jesus and His Holy Mother are welcome to worship with us." Corporal Holzer and Maximilian shook hands. The handshake of the 26-year-old Wehrmacht corporal and the 46-year-old Polish Franciscan once again provided a surrealistic scene. The conqueror petitioning the conquered for permission. The victor receiving the body of the Lord from the hands of the vanquished, and both subjugator and subjugated, united as fraternal suppliants before the Holy Eucharist. Another inspiring testimony to Father Maximilian's missionary zeal comes from the pen of the Reverend Hans Moltzer, the commandant of the Ostrichow internment center. In a letter dated December 13th, 1970, to Brother Juventine, who was preparing his biography, I Knew Blessed Maximilian, Reverend Hans Moltzer wrote, "At his departure from Ostrichow, Father Maximilian pressed into my palm a medal of the Blessed Virgin Mary, which I cherished as a token of his goodwill for me. The medal accompanied me through Poland to Russia and back, and through France until August 1944, when American planes strafed our unit. Their fire struck a car carrying the officer's luggage. Everything went up in flames, including my medal. Kindly accept these sincere greetings from Hans Moltzer, who has never forgotten and who never will forget the Franciscans in the Ostrichow internment center." Even at Auschwitz, and until his last breath in the starvation bunker, Father Maximilian continued to minister to his fellow inmates. His martyr death, sacrificing himself for his countryman Franciszek Gajnicek, assured him of the Red Crown offered to him in his youth by the Immaculata. The French Protestant pastor Aimé Boniface, who himself had been an inmate in the concentration camps, beautifully described Father Kolbe's last act of Christian love. What an exemplary attitude of a transparent love that goes to the limits of the agape logic. I conclude with my personal poetic tribute to the great missionary martyr, Saint Maximilian Maria Kolbe. Knight of Mary, son of Poland, martyr for humanity, patron of our plague century, son of weavers in Zadunska Wola born, your person's warp and woof, woven on parental and patriotic loom, fabric and fiber by Providence skillfully patterned into a little flower reflecting heaven's bloom. Child of Pabianice in St. Matthew's Parish Church, by the Virgin selected, your mission and martyrdom prophesied, by white and red crowns, knight by your Queen elected. On Częstochowa pilgrimage, you surveyed from the distance St. Mary's slender steeple upon her shining station, Yasna Gora, where faith perceives in mount, sanctuary and shrine, the sentinel of the nation. Pupil and disciple in St. Francis's Holy School, initiator of Militia Immaculatae, the Virgin's servant, missionary, and fool. Lvov, Krakow, Grodno, Nipokalano, Mugensai no Sono, your mission stations of gospel dissemination. Rishesh Nipokalani and Saibo no Kishi, evangels of universal gospel propagation. Miraculous medal, your arsenal's badge and spiritual bullet, the second Eve's weapon in the serpent's ultimate subjugation. From Nipokalanov to Nagasaki, stretches the bow of your missionary activity, providentially preserved and sustained by your sanctified sodality. Having seized every opportunity, employing the gifts of your Master bold, heaven acknowledges your stewardship, talents returned 100-fold. Though you were not permitted to bury your bones in beloved Mugenshi no Sono's foundation, in keeping with your cosmic mission, you were granted a more universal memorial, your ashes borne by the winds throughout all creation. Your witness demonstrated the courage you receive from above. To lay down one's life for the neighbor, Christ said, is the greatest manifestation of love. Personification of your suffering nation, heir of her patriot poets, who by uplifting the hearts their people sustained, you, patriot, patron, martyr, saint, humanity's homage forever have gained. The demons at Auschwitz were fettered for that compassionate interlude in time and space, when you, standing before Fritsch and gesturing toward your countryman František Gajanitsek, implored, "Let me take his place." Even in the starvation bunker, you provided a selfless example the world rarely has seen. Out of love for God and mankind, embracing death, you expired with the Virgin's name on your lips, faithful to the end in the service of your Queen.